Hi, everybody. Welcome to episode 148 of Radio 815, the podcast dedicated to examining the works of writer, director, producer J.J. Abrams, as well as his extended Bad Robot universe. I'm Matt Crandall, here, as always, with Marcelo Inostroza, as we continue to watch What About Brian, the Bad Robot-produced ABC series from the early 2000s. Today we are talking about episode 3 of the first season, entitled Moving Day. Marcelo, are you going to steal some boxes from a back alley, or are you just going to go to Box Brothers and pick them up?
Go to Box Brothers. Can somebody please tell me why a physician is so goddamn cheap? She has to go behind Sam's Club. Sam's Club is a big boxing company, is a big boxing chain that we have here in the States, and steal boxes. She is a goddamn physician, and the fact that Marjorie is so cheap that she would actually want to steal boxes to move out of her apartment and to move in with Adam, it just shocks me. But the thing that I loved about this opening scene is when Adam mentions Box Brothers, a couple minutes later, a guy that works at the place where they're stealing boxes from comes out and asks Marjorie and Adam what the hell they're doing. And she's like, "Oh, we need boxes. I'm moving in with him and we want to save a couple bucks." And he goes, why don't you just go to Box World? It was a really, really, really small, funny moment that just played really well for me.
Yeah, I thought it was good, and it just reminds us, like, okay, Adam and Marjorie are going forward now that, 2 episodes ago he didn't dump her, they got engaged, they are getting ready to move in together, and from that scene we get a lot about Marjorie. She's kind of frugal. She's not just going to go to Box Brothers and buy boxes, she's going to get them for free, and Adam is a little bit more like, can we just do the easy thing rather than this? And like, there's roach eggs in here, like we can't do this. So we're seeing their 2 different personalities and a little bit of their clash, but it's not like major. And from that, we go to the gang, all the guys in one room and all the girls in another, as they're packing up Marjorie's shit. And the guys are going through the closet and they're talking about Brian's relationship woes, and they look at a shirt and it reminds him of Lisa B. And he's like, is this a sign? Should I reach out to Lisa B? And they're like, it's not a sign. There's no signs. Like, what are you talking about? And then the girls are just talking in the kitchen about, Marjorie, are you afraid that you're locking it down? And luckily you have seen a bit of the world and you've gone out there and you've slept with 9 different guys. And Dina is like, oh man, I wish my number was 9. And Nick is like, am I a total slut? Because my number is way bigger than 9. And so I thought that scene is kind of funny, where we're getting the 2 dynamics of the guys, kind of busting Brian's balls about his situation, and the girls concerned with slightly different things. What do you think, as we're kind of getting the sexes separated as they're talking through their ideas of this relationship taking the next step of moving in together?
I think it's a really, really interesting device from a writing perspective to take your main cast and to separate them between the boys and the girls, and to see how these 2 different groups view the same event. You have the boys talking about one thing in one room, like Matt said, and they're not the guys. The guys aren't really talking about what's going to happen with Marjorie and Adam. The guys are talking about wanting to prop up Brian and telling him that because they find a piece of clothing in the closet, that doesn't necessarily mean that Brian is going to run into Lisa B again, and who knows where that's going to lead. But the thing that really, really resonated with me is the conversation that the girls were having in the kitchen. Dina was trying to tell Marjorie to really, really enjoy this time, because once you have kids, it's all over, right? Everything goes downhill. So I really, really like the way that all the girls sort of brought their difference of opinions into what they think Marjorie should do. But the one piece of the one piece of opinion that really rang true to me is the advice that Dina gave to Marjorie, that enjoy this time because once you have kids, it's all over.
Yeah, it's, a sentiment that we have seen. And basically, shortly after that, we go to morning at Dina and Dave's house. And there's a funny moment where the one kid is throwing cereal at the baby. And they're like, don't throw cereal at the baby. She goes, she likes it. And of course, the baby doesn't really like it. And Dave has to drive one of the kids to school instead of Dina because Larissa is sick. Dave is kind of stressed because it's the day of his big presentation, and Dina, is up to her kind of stuff where now she's at home with the kids and kind of bored. And there is a scene shortly after where she gets on the phone to Richard. John Hamm gives her a call and he says like, hey, what's going on? I'm just sitting here writing. And so we find out he's like a writer. It seems like he's a screenwriter of some kind, which is, the writers throwing in, something obviously that they know about, but also we kind of don't love Richard at this point, but he asks for, input on a character's name, and Dina gives him a reason to change the character's name to something else and gives a character backstory, and they're kind of hitting it off. He says, maybe we should meet up at the park later. And she says, okay, I got a sick kid, but I think we can do that. So yeah, we'll meet you at the park in a couple hours. So that's how her morning is going. And we see the other people during the morning. Marjorie is getting ready for her move. Adam is not going to help with the move because he has a new client that he needs to really impress. And if he impresses this client, then maybe he can make partner. Marjorie's kind of pissed that he leaves it to last minute to tell her, like, I'm not going to be able to move. She's like, why didn't you tell me sooner? He said, because I didn't want to have a fight all weekend, so I waited till the last minute. So now you're mad at me, but, like, please forgive me. And she does. But Angelo shows up first thing in the morning to help get ready for the move, like, way early, because everybody's still asleep. They come to the door, and they're like, what the hell? And we find out that for some reason, again, because Marjorie is kind of cheap, as we're learning, she has hired a company called Ex-Con Movers. That's basically a bunch of criminals who have been, reformed, who come and move your shit. And Adam says, I don't know, I'm leaving you here with my Italian friend, and you're going to have all these ex-con movers show up. This sounds like the beginning of a porno movie, and things are going to go bad. And so he's like, I got to go to work because I'm too stressed about this big client. And so Angelo is helping get stuff ready. But of course, the movers are not there on time, and they don't give a shit. Marjorie's day is not going the way she had planned. Then we cut to Brian and Dave getting ready for their big game presentation. And we get a really funny moment where they arrive to work and they are dressed exactly the same. They're wearing the same shirt, the same pants. And Dave's like, well, you got to change. And Brian's like, no, you have to change. Dave's like, well, I'm not changing. You're the one, like, just do something with your shirt, untuck it. Like, you got hippie hair, you got girl hair. Like, you can kind of change your style up and make yourself look different. So I really liked where those two guys are both stressed and they're getting ready for the presentation and they're bickering like an old married couple. And this is the start of something that keeps going on throughout this whole episode, is that Brian and Dave keep having these small fights where, like, they really are getting on each other's nerves because they're so stressed out about this big presentation. What do you think as the moving storyline, the John Hamm storyline, and the Zap Monkey presentation storyline are kind of all dominating the early parts of this episode?
Okay, first of all, the John Hamm storyline with Dina. I've loved John Hamm as an actor, not because of Man, because of The Town. I was incensed that they made this guy a fucking writer, because he's such a fucking dickbag. He has no redeeming qualities. I said a couple weeks ago that I wish that Dina would have asked some other moms around so she could get a better idea of who John Hamm's character was. But I really think that at this point in her life, Dina needs some excitement, and I think it's going to come at the cost of her marriage. I think that she's going to make a decision in this episode or further down the road that she is going to regret with Dave, and her marriage is going to sort of suffer because of her bad choices and because of her inability to speak to her husband and be truthful with one another. And I think that's really going to be an interesting train wreck to watch. The one thing that I really loved about this episode, well, I loved a lot of things, but I really loved Dave and Brian stressing out about their video game presentation. I really love that during their video game presentation, the video game that they are presenting to these potential investors is like it's like an open world game. So it's like if The Last of Us was made like in 2001, right? And I love the fact that Dave actually takes the image of one of the potential investors to the video game and he puts that person's image in the game, and he makes that girl like an assassin riding a motorcycle. I thought that was really really awesome. But also, I really appreciate that Marjorie has this sense of I can do it on my own, because all throughout this episode, poor Marjorie is over her fucking head. Number one, because she's cheap. Number two, because she hires a movie company that is full of ex-cons. So the potential for those ex-cons to steal all her stuff is very, very high. Later on in the episode, we find out that the company that she hired isn't going to show up in the first place. And if this company doesn't show up at a certain time, all her stuff is going to be left out on the lawn of the apartment that she's just leaving, and she's going to lose her security deposit because her landlord, Mrs. Chen, is a stickler for the rules. And all that she had to do was call Adam and ask him for his help, but she wasn't willing to do that. It's really interesting to me that two main couples in this series, so many of the problems that they're having could be solved by them actually fucking talking to each other and being truthful with one another. The two couples that I want to mention are Marjorie and Adam, and Dave and Dina. And one more thing. Is it just me, or does the actor who plays Adam, does he look like a young Bradley Cooper to you?
Maybe. I haven't ever thought about it, so I don't know. He's got a punchable face, much more so than I think Bradley Cooper does. But yeah, it's interesting as, you know, Marjorie doesn't want to call Adam because she knows that he has a big day at work, so she doesn't want to disturb him. And what's kind of annoying is that she doesn't want to disturb Adam on his big day at work, but she's perfectly happy disturbing Brian and Dave on their big day at work, which kind of seems like, are you fucking kidding me? Like, these other guys had a really big day at work too, and you're perfectly fine calling them for help. But it is all because she is breaking her lease, and Mrs. Chin has agreed to let her break the lease, so she can't put all this stuff back and say, like, I need 2 more days. She's got to find a way to get this done now. And so after their presentation, Dave and Brian do come when they're in their waiting period and they're stressed out. But I like right before the presentation, Dave and Brian get into another little fight. Brian wants to talk about Lisa B and signs, and Dave is like, can we just focus on the presentation? Who gives a shit about Lisa B? And like, I don't know why you're so fixated on this dating stuff. And Brian's like, well, you're just mad because your wife wants to do the dating stuff too. And he's like, okay, shut up. That's not what this is about. But yes, she's still going forward with this, and I'm not really into it. They're bickering over the presentation and how they can finish the presentation with either the tagline, rule your fantasy or control your fantasy. And they're fighting over that. And as they are still fighting, the presentation people show up. And I like this moment where, you know, Dave has been very reluctant to want to have this open marriage thing. But part of the team that they're presenting to, this woman, Suzanne, played by Marguerite Moreau from Wet Hot American Summer, The Mighty Ducks, and she did guest spots on Lost, The OC, and Mad Men before. So she's kind of in the mix in a lot of these shows. Shows up, and as on her way in, her and Dave are sharing like a moment, and Dave's like kind of caught off guard because it seems like sparks are kind of flying. And after the presentation, she tells him, like, I just want you to know I loved the game Throttle Autobahn, which is Dave's claim to fame, this past game of his. She's like, this new game sounds amazing, but I wanted to know who made this other game because I loved it so much when I used to play it. And then Dave is kind of like, oh my gosh, is there something happening here? And then she looks at him, and she's talking about the presentation, but she might as well be talking about something else. And she goes, it's going to happen. And he's like, it's going to happen? And she's like, oh yes, it's going to happen. And so that's right after that is when Brian and Dave show up to help Marjorie. And it's just funny that, like, you know, Dave has been against this whole thing. And this whole episode, Dina is trying to meet up with John Hamm, but her kid pukes on her shoes and they don't go to the park. And then she sets a coffee date for later at night. but things keep getting in the way. Dave, who's not actively trying, kind of has this meet cute at this presentation that we think this might be something moving forward. So by the time this scene rolls around, are you thinking Dave might be the first one to actually score on this open marriage? Or do you still think, even though Dina and John Hamm have had a lot of misconnections early in the episode, is she going to be the one to still land this plane early?
I think at this point, because Dina and John Hamm's character have had so many connections, my money was on them hooking up first. But when Dave met this executive lady, I really feel happy for Dave, because as much as I like Dave and Dina together as a married couple, the chemistry that Dave has with this executive lady is so much better than the chemistry that he has with his wife. And I don't know what that's about. I don't know if that is, I don't know if that's a thing, that you have better chemistry as opposed to having okay chemistry with the one that you're in love with. I don't know what that's about. But to answer your question, I think it's 50-50, but I think Dina's going to break first. And if Dina breaks first, I think Dave is going to react, and that's when he's going to fully surrender to a potential relationship with this hot young executive girl who likes him for him and who can connect with him on a level that Dina can't, because this girl is a fucking nerd. I mean, she came to Zap Monkey loving his previous game. So what does that tell you?
Well, what's interesting, I think, is that throughout this episode, we see Dave and Suzanne have great chemistry together. And obviously, Dina and Richard, John Hamm's character, do have like a good rapport together as well, which would make you think like, okay, maybe these two aren't meant to be together, but they do also as a couple have a really nice scene. So after all of the moving stuff has gone on, Dave has a freak out about signs, and he's mad that Angela's going to leave to go do a Mr. Clean commercial. And then Brian gets the truck started after this breakdown, and they start to think maybe their luck is changing. In between this, Dave goes home, and he gets home right as Dina is about to go meet John Hamm at the coffee shop. And so instead of going to meet John Hamm, she stays, and they do have a talk together. I can see you're stressed out because of work. Thinking back on our time together, my favorite thing that ever happened was our 3rd anniversary, where we were so dirt poor. We didn't even have like $5 to our name, and we wanted to do something fun. And so we ordered pizza and cheesy bread and wings. And when it arrived, you gave the guy a 20 and told him to keep the change, even though like we didn't have anything, but like you still are a generous guy who goes out of his way to do the right thing. And she said, that is one of our best moments, which shows you've married a very low rent chick. Like there's not much that I need from you. It's just, if you're here, that's enough. And so we see they have this really nice moment. And Dave says, well, it didn't hurt that we were baked out of our minds. And so when they still have moments of connection like that, it's frustrating that they are going to be stepping out on one another, because when they sit down and they put the kids aside and they try and de-stress, they still have a really good time together. And so it's frustrating that you're like, if they could just talk this all out, maybe they can get back to a good place without doing the thing that, because we know Dave has been a little bit apprehensive. Even if he goes for it, I don't think his heart's going to be in it. And I feel like Dina is going to think that her heart is in it until it's done. And then she's going to maybe realize like this was not the Band-Aid. This was a thing that made the crack worse. So what are you thinking as they have that moment before we'll save the very final scene of the episode till a little bit further down, but they have that moment where like, it seems like maybe they can work through this, but we still kind of know it's not going to be smooth.
I love that moment between Dina and Dave when they're talking about when they were dirt poor and ordering pizza and not having enough money to pay the delivery dude. But when Dina says, basically she says, all I need is you, you're enough. When she said that to Dave, I wanted to fucking stand up and say, bullshit, he is not enough for you. Because if he was, you wouldn't have suggested this open marriage bullshit. And another thing, instead of talking right now about about what the two of you love about one another and why you're with one another. Here's an idea. Why don't you do this? Why don't you fucking do this while you guys are having sex? Do this during sex. Because I'm really thinking, if in that moment the writers showed them having the same conversation, the betrayal by either one of them that may come further down the road, I think from a story point, that would have made the betrayal hurt even more, because they would have had sex in this moment, but despite them having a moment and despite them having sex later on, either one of them would step out. So I think that would have created more tension between the two of them. But the fact that they didn't have that moment and they just had this conversation that was really, really fucking frustrating, because I know Dina wants more out of her marriage with Dave. So why doesn't she fucking tell him? Because if she doesn't tell him, something awful is going to happen. And like you said, I think Dina is going to have to get run over by that train called Richard to understand that this is not what she really wants. That sleeping with somebody else, like Matt said, is just a band-aid to cover up the bigger problem that they have between one another. And that's driving me fucking crazy.
And another thing that kind of drives us fucking crazy about couples not communicating well is that the Angelo and Nick storyline of this is that Nicole has been seeing the fertility doctor and trying to find out her options. And he says, we can put you on treatments, but there's lots of side effects and it might not work. And her and Angelo, after Angelo helps with the moving and does his audition and all that shit, go out for dinner. And she tells him, like, I went and saw this doctor and here's what he said. And he's like, how could you have gone and saw this doctor behind my back? You're always making choices without me. If it's going to be all these hoops that we have to jump through, I don't want a fucking baby at all. So put the brakes on that. And this is, again, two people who are not communicating very good. It's a little bit surprising because it maybe shows that Angelo's heart is not in it, because yes, I can understand feeling cut out of the decision, but if you ultimately wanted a baby, then I think it is worth the hoops. That tells us a lot about like how invested he is in the relationship, and that maybe things aren't as solid as they have been presented up to that point. And then later in the episode, we do see that Nicole is taking injections behind his back and is going to go forward with the treatments, even though she had told him, like, I won't. So that's another shoe that's going to drop. And speaking of like marriages going south, the whole time Adam is dealing with this new client, Mr. Bellows from Fortune magazine, the dude is just a cheerleader for not getting married. There's a moment where Adam has to stand up to him and treat him like a piece of shit so that this guy's impressed by how cutthroat Adam is. Adam's like, you don't listen to people, and if you don't listen to me, you're going to get screwed over. And this guy says, oh, you're a smart young man, and what are you doing with your future? And he's like, well, I'm getting married. And he's like, don't. Whatever you do, don't get married. They take more. They say they get half. No, they get 75%. Don't get married. It's the worst. And he even tells him, if there was a 50% chance that if you bought a new car, it would blow up driving off the lot, would you still buy it? And he goes, I don't think so. You would never do that. And he says to Adam, don't marry this chick. There's a trophy wife out there for you who hasn't even entered the 5th grade yet. And I'm like, this fucking piece of shit. And what makes me even more mad is that Adam is actually taking all this in. He's not shooting it down. We see him kind of running the numbers in his head and thinking like, is this what I really want? And so the whole time I'm like, you piece of garbage, Adam. We then cut to Brian and Marjorie finishing the move. So like Dave has gone off and Brian is still wrapping things up. And Marjorie says to Brian, today was supposed to be the first real day of me and Adam as a couple. Like moving in is like this big step where we're making everything official. And instead I ended up spending the whole day with you. And she gives him a hug and they kind of look at each other like the tension is there. Like, I did spend the whole day with you and I gave you this hug and I love you, but we need to find a way to work through our stuff, because I am going to marry your best friend. There are going to be hugs between us for the next 50 years. So we need to find a way to move forward without it being awkward every time, because she knows Brian has feelings. And so she's kind of addressing the elephant in the room, and Brian is still trying to take the high road where he's like, yeah, no, I'm fine with it. What do you think, as this is all intercut with Adam taking in this asshole's thoughts on marriage, and like dependable Brian is there and they have this special day, but yet she has to keep him at arm's length because they can't give in.
When it comes to Adam taking this horrible advice from this pedophile piece of shit that he's trying to impress for his firm, I was thinking in the back of my head, okay, this guy is an asshole. Adam should not listen to a goddamn thing that he's saying right at this very moment. But in the back of my head, although like you, I saw Adam running the numbers in his head while this guy was giving him awful advice, but I kept thinking this conversation is going to push Adam towards Marjorie that much more. And it's going to make Adam realize how lucky he is, despite the fact that he doesn't deserve Marjorie. Brian is the one that deserves Marjorie because Adam is a guy that doesn't understand what he wants, and he doesn't get how lucky he is. I've said this in prior weeks, but I feel for Adam to truly understand how special how lucky he is to have Marjorie, something has to happen between Marjorie and Brian. And I think that in this episode, I really think the Marjorie and Brian relationship is basically steps away from falling off the cliff. So it'll be really interesting to see if in the coming weeks here, let's say Brian and Marjorie, for some weird reason, finally admit each other's feelings for one another and try and escape and try to have romantic getaways, which I think would be really cool, because number one, they could do that, but they could actually play that for laughs, right? It could be half serious, and they could half play for laughs. The other thing that really frustrates me about Marjorie and Brian is that they keep thinking to one another. They keep thinking that their feelings for each other really don't matter. And here's the thing: when you love somebody the way that they love each other, no matter what you do, no matter how much dirt you put on top of your feelings for one another, your feelings for one another is going to come through all that dirt. So it's really frustrating to see them constantly trying to make excuses for their feelings for one another. And it's fucking driving me crazy. But the moment that I really like for Adam, despite me not liking him very much, is that when he comes home from his meeting, he sees that Marjorie is fully moved in. The house looks beautiful. Marjorie set a great table. She put some books everywhere. He goes into the kitchen and Marjorie asks him about his day. And he goes, I was speaking to this guy and he convinced me not to get married. And I really, really love the way that the actor sort of said that haphazardly. And Marjorie was like, huh. And then Adam said something very, very interesting. When I walked in the door, I was really hoping that you were going to be here. And when I noticed you were, I was so happy. And that made me, for a split second, like Adam. And I was like, no, what's happening here? This guy's a dick. I'm supposed to hate him.
And I still do hate him. Especially, he does get home and he's like, honey, I'm home. And he comes in with a pizza and he sees that she has done all this nice stuff. I did appreciate that he's honest, but the way he starts telling her is like, all day this guy was pitching me on why not to get married. The drive home, I was thinking, I wish I was going to be alone tonight. And I'm like, you fuck, what are you doing? And then he goes, but then as soon as I walked in the door, then I'm glad you're here and I'm happy that this is happening. But he says to her, but then I realized this guy was wrong because marriage isn't a big deal and it's just us and nothing has to change. And Marjorie says like, yeah, I've been kind of running the same calculation, but like marriage is kind of a big deal. And like there will be some change that comes along with it. And, today was a big day and you weren't here and I didn't feel like I could call you. And he says, well, that's stupid. You should have just called me. Of course you can call me no matter what. And she said, okay, like, I'm glad we had this talk because now I'm feeling better about it. But as we go forward, like, I want your help in making all the decisions for the wedding. And Adam agrees to it. He says, whatever you want, we will do this together. Together is how we will do it moving forward, rather than like two single people trying to keep stuff separate and not get the mess on each other. we will move forward as a couple. So I like that sentiment, but I still hate Adam with every fiber of my being because he's just a douche. So that's where we kind of leave those two at the end of the episode, is that they're happy and they are going to move forward. After Brian has his talk with Marjorie, we literally see him doing like the Charlie Brown, George Michael from Arrested Development, sad sack piece of shit walk down a street where he's like just moping, and he happens to run into Lisa B. And he says to her, you know, I've been thinking about you because I keep getting all these signs and like, I don't know if these signs are real. And she says, look, you got to be open to possibilities. That's when you're going to actually see the signs, and maybe that is something. And they have like a cute moment together where she says, oh, can I borrow 2 quarters? I see a meter maid on their way over to ticket this car. And Brian gives her the quarters and he goes, oh, is this your car? And she says, no, I just don't want these people to have their day ruined by getting tickets. And so we like Lisa B even more in that moment. And so does Brian. Then he says, like, can I call you? And she says no. And we're like, what? And then she pulls a psych moment where she's like, I'll call you. And we're like, okay, writers, like, that's, what are you doing? Trying to pull the rug out from under us for a second? But so by the end, Brian and Lisa B do seem like they are a good match and there is chemistry there. And they show us that random act of kindness that she does so that we like her and Brian likes her, and they are going to be open to the possibilities in the future and see what happens. Despite the way that they met being kind of icky because of her roommate, the other Lisa, which we are just going to maybe not address going forward, but we'll see. So I thought that was interesting. And then the 2 big final scenes of the episode are that after this interaction, Brian goes back to the office and Dave is there. And Dave and Brian have been having these married coupled fights all episode. And he says, yeah, I had to come back to the office because I forgot my laptop and we haven't gotten the call, even though we've both been watching our phones nonstop. And Dave's like, yeah, I forgot my laptop and like, I'm sorry. And they apologize and have like this makeup moment where they realize that they were letting other shit get in the way of their friendship. And then their phones both ring at the same time and they literally hold hands while they're taking the call.
Angelo, as much as I don't like him, he's not ready to be a parent. He doesn't want to be a parent. Because here's the thing. When you have children, your life goes from being about you and your partner to being about your children and providing for your children and making sure that they have everything that they need. And I think the only thing that Angelo wants is to be in a relationship with his partner, and he doesn't want to have a child. But the fact that he can't get her to understand that, the fact that she thinks that she needs to have a child to make their relationship work really, really distresses me. And it really, really ticks me off. I've said a version of this in previous weeks, but as much as I don't like this couple, this is the only couple in the show that I feel gets shortchanged. And this is the only couple that I could kind of live without. I could stick them on the Lost Island and never see them again. I really think that this relationship has the potential to be the most heartbreaking. Am I completely crazy for thinking that?
I don't think you're crazy, but I'm not invested in them. So even if they break up tomorrow, I'm like, who cares?
Yeah, with Brian finally having that destiny moment, meeting Lisa B on the street. I really, really like Lisa B. But here's the thing. Brian is destined to be with Marjorie. So as an audience member, we know from the start that no matter how good this potential relationship may be between Brian and Lisa B, it's not going to stick. So something is going to happen to break them up. And I'm really, really pissed off about that because I really, really love Lisa B. And she doesn't deserve to be another wheel in this love triangle between Brian and Marjorie and Adam to some extent. She doesn't deserve to be the fourth fucking wheel, but that's what she's going to be because I really think in this potential relationship that Brian is going to have with Lisa B, I think that one of those insecurities that may possibly come up is the way that he feels about Marjorie. And if he brings that up to Lisa B is going to run. Lisa B doesn't seem to me to be the type of person that would just stick with somebody. Lisa B doesn't seem to me to be that type of person that would just stick with somebody because the sex is good. She seems to be the type of person that that has some morals and has some respect for herself. So I'm really, really afraid for her, but I'm really, really interested to see where the relationship is going to go.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I don't know if this show is going to be the kind of show where Brian and Marjorie aren't destined to be together, and Brian's just going to have to get over it because his best friend is going to go through, which is like something that happens to a lot of people in real life. Or is it going to be building towards the realization that they're meant to be together despite the bad taste it'll leave in everyone's mouth over it? So I think it's interesting to see where they are heading, and especially knowing that what we know now, this isn't a show that runs for 10 years. This is a show that only has 2 seasons, and they're both short. So hopefully there will be some resolution of that coming up. And I did really like, the celebration moment where all of this stuff is put on hold as Brian and Dave get the deal, and they're just so happy with one another. Like, you were right, and they apologize for all this stuff, and like, you were right, control your fantasy was better rather than rule your fantasy, and thank God, and they're celebrating. And as Dave is having this moment of triumph, we cut to the final scene of the episode, which is Dina coming out of the grocery store. Who does she run into but motherfucking John Hamm, who's like, oh, what are you doing here after us missing each other all day? And I'm like, this creep, did he nowadays I'd be like, he stalked her Insta, what the fuck is this guy doing here? And so he offers to help with the groceries, and she says like, oh, are you mad that like I missed out meeting you twice today? And he says, no, I'm not mad. Like, what happened? And she says, life got in the way, I couldn't make it happen. And as they're unloading the groceries into the back of the minivan, they start making out. And then it goes from making out to they're jumping in the back of the minivan to fuck each other, and the back of the thing is closing, and like they're just gonna have sex in the parking lot. And I'm like, this is horrible. So awkward and weird. What are you thinking as that's the note we end on? Dina's getting plowed in the back of a minivan, and all those groceries are fucking ruined.
I'm like, God damn it, fuck. I was like, I said that it was 50-50 whether it was going to be Dave or Dina first, but this last scene really, really, really fucking infuriated me. And here's the thing. At this point, I pray that Dave hooks up with that girl, because the fact that Dina couldn't be honest with Dave to tell Dave that, for God's sakes, they need to fucking send their children to Siberia for like an hour and just go to town on one another. It drove me insane. But on one hand, I want to kill Dina. But on the other hand, I'm happy that she's going to be looser in the next episode, let's say. But I'm really interested to see how her disgusting get together with John Hamm in the back of a minivan with all that food is going to impact her moving forward. I'm really interested to see if she's going to feel guilty about it. She's going to try and pretend that this didn't happen. But in all honesty, I really think that she's going to continue the relationship with John Hamm until she's caught. And when she's caught, I think that is going to be the open door for Dave to say, fuck it, you cheated on me, now I'm going to cheat on you, which is going to take off the band-aid that they tried to put on their marriage, and there you're going to see the gaping wound that they're going to have to deal with in season 2. The one thing that I'm worried about, and no spoilers, I really am worried about that a lot of these storylines that I'm really enjoying are not going to be resolved in a satisfying way with the show only having 2 seasons. I hope that we get some resolution, at least with Brian and Marjorie. But I'm really, really scared for some of the other couples in here.
Yeah, I think we will have to see how it all plays out, because shortened seasons and unaired episodes and actors moving on to other shows all becomes kind of an issue at a certain point as we will move forward. And definitely we'll have to see if Dave finds out about Dina, does that just light fuel under him to pursue Suzanne, or how that plays out. And we will find out as we continue moving forward, next week we will talk about episode 4, the importance of being Brian. So if you are watching along, that's the one to watch for next week. And make sure you clear all the messages from your answering machine before you do so as we get ready for that episode. If you guys like this show at all, you can let us know by using the hashtag Radio815 and leaving us a comment or a review. We will read it on the show, or email us jjuniverse815@aol.com. And, like, follow, subscribe on any podcast format, station, Spotify, all that stuff. Or you can watch not video, but video audio on youtube.com/radio815 if you prefer that. If you want to get in touch with me, but I am logging movies over on Letterboxd at MDC3000. Marcelo, you still welcome social media comments and concerns, and where can the people reach out to you?
I do. If you guys want to get in touch with me and see what YouTubers I'm watching these days, I'm watching these really cool YouTubers called Armchair Directors. You should really go and check them out. But if you want to go and talk to me about this show or any other show in the Bad Robot universe, you can just reach me on X. I'm at CreekFanatic88.
All right. Thanks so much for listening. Until next time, Radio 815 over and out.
Radio 815 is a Balloonhead Productions presentation in association with Killer Newt Productions.